Imagine a figure of a woman whose gaze can turn anyone to stone. It's a powerful, almost terrifying image, yet deeply symbolic. Medusa, one of the most iconic names in Greek mythology, wasn't always the monstrous creature we know. Before being transformed into a gorgon, she was a beautiful young woman, a priestess devoted to the goddess Athena. But her fate, marked by tragedy, led her to become a figure that encapsulates both power and suffering. Medusa's story challenges us to question the boundaries between victim and villain. She didn't ask to be turned into a monster, but was forced into it by circumstances beyond her control. Her transformation serves as a powerful metaphor for how society deals with those who are different or who challenge the status quo. Instead of receiving protection or justice, Medusa was punished in a way that resonates with universal themes of injustice and disproportionate retribution. So, what can we learn from this? Medusa's story is more than a horror tale. It's a reflection on power, beauty, and the nature of punishment. It teaches us that the most feared figures are often the most misunderstood. Medusa, who began as a victim, was transformed into a symbol of terror, but that's only one facet of her story. As we explore her legend, we see that Medusa represents much more. She's a reminder of the complexity of mythological narratives and how these ancient stories continue to influence the way we perceive the world. In this content, we'll dive deep into Medusa's story, from her origins to her lasting impact on modern culture. You'll discover that Medusa is more than just an ancient legend. She's a mirror for the issues we still face today, issues of power, injustice, and the enduring legacy of mythological figures. So, get ready for a journey that not only demystifies but also humanizes one of the most fascinating and tragic characters in mythology. Medusa, one of the most iconic figures in Greek mythology, offers a fascinating example of how legends can evolve over time. Initially, she was depicted as a horrifying gorgon, a monster whose gaze could turn anyone to stone. However, like many ancient stories, what was once seen as monstrous eventually gained deeper and more complex layers, reflecting a shift in perception through the ages. As time passed, versions of her story emerged that portrayed her as a stunningly beautiful young woman, a priestess devoted to the goddess Athena. Here, the narrative takes an unexpected turn. Medusa, originally a fearsome figure, is now seen as a victim of divine circumstances. The transition from a monstrous creature to a wronged woman is a reinterpretation that resonates with modern audiences, reminding us that even the oldest legends have multiple facets. Over the centuries, the myth of Medusa came to represent more than just a frightening figure from Greek mythology. She became a symbol of both feminine power and vulnerability, something shared by many mythological figures. Think of figures like Isis and Osiris in Egyptian mythology, or the Norse goddesses, who also have stories of power and suffering. These stories cross cultural boundaries, showing us that mythology is a universal language. In literature and art, Medusa is often used as a metaphor for the fight against oppression, particularly in the context of women's struggles. Her image has been adopted as a symbol of strength, resisting forces that try to control her. Like many gods and heroes in comparative mythology, Medusa embodies the paradox between power and weakness, between beauty and monstrosity. In a sense, the evolution of Medusa reflects how we interpret the role of women in society over time. Medusa, who began as a creature to be feared, is now seen as a tragic figure, a heroine in her own right, whose myth offers a powerful lesson about the injustices of the world. She reminds us that myths are not just ancient stories, they are mirrors of our own struggles and aspirations. As we delve into the figure of Medusa, we see her myth intertwine with other ancient legends from pantheons around the world. For example, Medusa's transformation can be compared to the stories of other mythological figures who suffered divine injustices, such as Prometheus, punished for bringing fire to humanity, or Lucifer in Christian mythology, who fell from paradise. These comparisons enrich our understanding of Medusa and her role in mythology. And so, as we reflect on Medusa and her evolution, we find ourselves faced with a story that still has much to teach us. The myth doesn't end with the petrification of her victims. It continues to resonate, inviting us to look more deeply into the stories that shape our cultures and beliefs. And speaking of origins and family, that aspect also has much to reveal about the roots of this fascinating figure, but that's a topic for the next point. Medusa, like many mythological figures, didn't emerge in isolation but belongs to a lineage of equally fascinating beings. As the daughter of the ancient sea gods Phorcys and Ceto, her origins are deeply rooted in Greek cosmogony, where the sea and its creatures play essential roles. Phorcys and Ceto, both deities associated with the vast and mysterious ocean, gave birth not only to Medusa but also to her two immortal sisters, Stheno and Euryale. This connection to the sea is no accident. In mythology, the sea often represents the unknown, the vast, and the impenetrable, much like Medusa's fate. Unlike her immortal sisters, Medusa was born mortal, a detail that from the start set her on a tragic path. Her mortality separated her from her sisters, creating a distinction that would be fundamental to the unfolding of her story. This mortality, seen by some as a weakness, is actually what makes Medusa such a powerful figure in mythology. After all, it is mortality that brings the inevitability of fate, something many heroes and mythological figures face. This can be compared to the dilemma of Achilles, who was also trapped between his heroic nature and his mortality. The fact that Medusa was born of sea gods also adds a layer of complexity to her story. The sea, in Greek mythology, is often viewed as a place of transition and transformation, where things are not always as they seem. This connection to the sea can be seen as a metaphor for Medusa's own transformation, from a beautiful young woman to a fearsome monster. Water, like Medusa, has the power to change, adapt, and hide unexpected depths. It's interesting to note how this connection to the sea appears in other mythologies, such as in Norse mythology, where the ocean is governed by gods like Aegir and Ran, who, like Phorcys and Ceto, have their own realms and secrets. Medusa's mortality, coupled with her divine origin, places her in a unique position within the Greek pantheon. She is not merely a mortal or a living dead, but a figure who embodies both the power of the gods and the vulnerability of mortals. This duality is what makes Medusa such a captivating and worthy subject of study within comparative mythology. In cultures around the world, we find figures who also possess this duality, like the semi-divine heroes in Mesoamerican mythology or the gods who walk among mortals in Hindu mythology. The role of family in Medusa's story cannot be underestimated. Her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, though immortal, share the same fate of being seen as monsters. However, it is Medusa, the mortal sister, who stands out in the narrative. This distinction within her own family reflects a common dynamic in mythologies, where the uniqueness of an individual can become the key to their legacy. Consider how figures like Thor in Norse mythology or Hercules in Greek mythology stand out within their divine families due to their singularity. Finally, Medusa's mortality and her relationship with her immortal parents and sisters set the stage for the unraveling of her story. From her origins, we see that Medusa's fate was sealed from the beginning, but this origin story is just the start. After all, Medusa's encounter with Perseus is where legends intersect and destinies are decided, something we will explore further ahead. The encounter between Medusa and Perseus is one of the most dramatic moments in Greek mythology, laden with tension and the inevitability of fate. Perseus, the hero destined to sever the head of the Gorgon, was not alone in his mission. He had the aid of the gods, who, recognizing the difficulty of his challenge, granted him divine gifts. Athena provided him with a shield polished like a mirror, Hermes with winged sandals, and Hades with the helmet of invisibility. These artifacts, more than mere tools, symbolize the importance of divine support in accomplishing great heroic feats. With these gifts in hand, Perseus set out for the cave where Medusa and her sisters dwelled, a place filled with statues, the former victims of her petrifying gaze. Using the shield as a mirror was an act of ingenuity, allowing Perseus to avoid looking directly at Medusa as he approached her. Here, Athena's shield plays a crucial role, reflecting not only Medusa's deadly gaze, but also the wisdom and strategy of the goddess. This scene embodies the concept that true power lies not just in brute strength, but in intelligence and careful preparation. The moment Perseus finally decapitates Medusa marks a turning point in the narrative. Even in her defeat, Medusa does not lose her terrible power. her head continues to turn those who gaze upon it into stone, symbolizing that even in death, Medusa's impact endures. The idea that Medusa's power transcends her own life reflects a common theme in mythology and culture: the legacy that extends beyond physical existence. This concept is echoed in other mythologies, such as the legend of Osiris in Egypt, whose dismembered body still holds profound and sacred power. From this point on, Perseus doesn't merely carry Medusa's head as a trophy, but uses it as a weapon in his future adventures. He takes it with him on his journey back, using the petrifying gaze to defeat his enemies and complete other heroic tasks. This continued use of Medusa's head exemplifies how, in mythology, trophies from great battles often transform into powerful tools, like Thor's hammer or Poseidon's trident. These artifacts become tangible symbols of the hero's power and victory. The encounter between Perseus and Medusa, though tragic, also serves as a lesson on the complexity of heroism. Perseus, the hero, is celebrated for his feat, but at the cost of a figure who, in later versions of the story, is seen as a victim of unjust circumstances. This makes us reflect on the roles of hero and victim in mythological narratives and how these dynamics can be reinterpreted. In modern times, this story has been revisited from different perspectives, questioning who truly deserves our empathy and recognition. Even after being decapitated, Medusa remains central to the story, with her head becoming a formidable weapon in Perseus's hands. The fact that her death doesn't end her impact in mythology suggests that myths, like Medusa, have lives that extend beyond their apparent end. This ability to continue influencing the world even after death is a theme that resonates in many mythologies, showing that legends possess a longevity that defies time and mortality. And so, as Perseus returns triumphant with Medusa's head, other questions begin to emerge. What happens next? What is Medusa's legacy? The answer to this lies not only in the continuation of the stories, but also in the emergence of new figures and symbols that arise from this fateful encounter. After the tragic encounter with Perseus, Medusa's story doesn't simply end with her death. From the open wound on her neck, two unexpected figures emerge: Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the giant armed with a golden sword. These beings are not mere decorative details, but powerful symbols that carry Medusa's legacy and her relationship with Poseidon. Pegasus, in particular, would become one of the most enduring icons of Greek mythology, a symbol of freedom and creative inspiration, while Chrysaor, though less well known, represents the hidden potential that can arise from adverse situations. Pegasus, born from Medusa's blood, stands as a testament to the duality present in mythological legends. From death and destruction, something beautiful and inspiring can emerge. This winged horse became central to various stories, including his role in aiding Bellerophon in his battle against the Chimera. Here, we see how Medusa's influence endures, not only through the terror her image still inspires, but also through the achievements of her descendants. This idea that something positive can emerge from the negative is a constant in mythologies around the world, such as the legend of the Phoenix, which is reborn from its ashes. Medusa's legacy isn't limited to her children. Her head, still carried by Perseus, is used in various situations to turn enemies to stone, proving that Medusa's power transcends her own existence. The head was eventually given to Athena, who placed it on her shield, the Aegis, further enhancing the symbolism of Medusa as a figure of enduring power. In many ways, Medusa transforms from a tragic figure into a force of protection and intimidation, something that can be seen in how her name and image have been adopted in various cultures as a talisman against evil. The durability of Medusa's legacy shows how mythological figures have the ability to reinvent themselves over time. What began as a story of horror and punishment has become a narrative rich in symbolism and meaning, crossing the boundaries of Greek mythology and seeping into popular culture. Medusa, with her iconic appearance and complex story, has become a recurring theme in literature, art, and even contemporary fashion, representing both fear and admiration. This ability to adapt reflects the mutable nature of legends, which continue to evolve as they are reinterpreted by new generations. Medusa's impact can be seen in various cultures beyond the Greek. For example, the idea of a petrifying gaze is not exclusive to Greek mythology. In several African legends, there are creatures whose presence or gaze can cause instant death. This shows how certain mythological archetypes transcend cultures, creating a web of interconnected beliefs that form what we might call a comprehensive mythology. Medusa, in this sense, is not just a singular figure but part of a global pantheon of mythological beings that share common themes and characteristics. Ultimately, the story of Medusa and her descendants reminds us that the impact of a mythic figure can extend far beyond their own narrative. Medusa, whose name still evokes a mix of fascination and terror, has become more than just a mythological character. She is a symbol of the persistence of myth, of how ancient stories continue to shape our cultures, religions, and arts. And so, while Medusa's head rests on Athena's shield, her legacy continues to resonate, inspiring new interpretations and reflections on the power and fragility of mythological beings. As we contemplate the enduring legacy of Medusa, we are reminded that those who seem the most tragic are often the most powerful. But not every tragedy is easily understood, and Medusa's story compels us to consider the complexities of her role as both victim and villain, a theme we will explore further as we delve into her transformation into a monstrous figure, punished by the gods. Medusa's story is one of the most emblematic tragedies in Greek mythology, a tale that compels us to question the boundaries between victim and villain. Before being transformed into a monstrous gorgon, Medusa was a beautiful young woman, a priestess devoted to the goddess Athena. However, her beauty attracted the unwanted attention of Poseidon, who violated her in the very temple of the goddess. This act of violence was not only a personal outrage, but also a desecration of a sacred space, unleashing Athena's fury. Yet, instead of punishing Poseidon, Athena directed her wrath at Medusa, turning her into a monster. This is a classic example of how, in many mythologies, victims of violence are doubly punished. Medusa's transformation is a moment fraught with symbolism and forces us to reflect on the injustices committed by those in positions of power. Athena, who should have been a protector, becomes the source of Medusa's torment, illustrating that even the gods are not free from committing acts of cruelty. This episode reflects a common theme in mythology and history: the abuse of power and the unjust punishment of the vulnerable. Across different cultures, we find similar narratives where the victim, instead of receiving justice, is punished for their own tragedy. This resonates in stories ranging from Norse mythology to modern urban legends. Medusa's metamorphosis into a monstrous creature is, in a way, a metaphor for how society often turns victims into outcasts. Her transformation is not only physical but also social, as Medusa, once admired, becomes feared and isolated. This abrupt change in status is something observable in various mythologies and even in contemporary society, where victims of certain misfortunes are often stigmatized or marginalized. Like Medusa, they are seen through a distorted lens, one that fails to recognize their true nature or the circumstances that led to their condition. Medusa's punishment raises questions about the morality of the gods and divine justice in mythology. If Athena, a goddess of wisdom and justice, can act so harshly and unjustly, what does this say about the Greek pantheon and its deities? This is a point echoed in many mythological stories where the gods, despite all their power, often act impulsively and imperfectly. This aspect of Greek mythology teaches us that even the gods, with all their might, are susceptible to human flaws, and their actions often reflect the complexities and contradictions of human morality. Medusa's tragedy also offers us insight into how mythological figures are reinterpreted over time. While in antiquity she was feared as a monster, modern interpretations often see her as a victim of circumstance, someone who was unjustly transformed into a freak. This reinterpretation reflects a shift in values and in how we view issues of power and justice. In film, literature, and even video games, Medusa is frequently portrayed in ways that emphasize her tragedy rather than just her monstrous power. Ultimately, the myth of Medusa reminds us that the stories we tell and retell are constantly evolving. The figure of Medusa has evolved from a mere monster to a complex symbol of suffering and injustice. This shows how mythology can be a powerful tool for exploring and questioning the values and norms of any era. And so, as we contemplate Medusa's tragedy, we are prompted to reflect on the lasting impact of these narratives and what they tell us about the nature of power and injustice. However, Medusa's story does not end solely in tragedy. It continues to live on in our modern culture, a theme that will be explored next. Medusa, a figure who emerged from the depths of Greek mythology, has managed to traverse the centuries to become a potent symbol in modern culture. Her image, with a head of snakes and a petrifying gaze, has transcended the pages of ancient myths and found a new home in visual arts, literature, cinema, and even fashion. It's not uncommon to see Medusa as an icon of female power, used by artists to express themes of rage, resistance, and empowerment. Her image is often adopted as a way to subvert traditional stereotypes of beauty and strength, challenging the patriarchal view that relegated her to the status of a monster. In cinema, Medusa appears in various interpretations, from literal adaptations of her legend to reinventions that explore her complexities as a tragic figure. Films like Clash of the Titans have presented Medusa as a formidable challenge for heroes, while more recent productions like Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, have introduced her to younger audiences, renewing interest in Greek mythology among new generations. Through these representations, Medusa maintains her presence as an obstacle to be overcome, but also as a reminder of the consequences of divine injustice. In fashion, Medusa's figure has been adopted as a symbol of power and luxury. The fashion house Versace, for example, uses the head of Medusa as its logo, associating the brand with a style that is both classic and bold. The choice of Medusa as an icon for a fashion brand is no accident. She symbolizes deadly beauty, dangerous seduction, and power that can both attract and repel. Through this lens, Medusa transforms from a mythological figure into a modern cultural icon, whose meaning is constantly reinterpreted and renewed. Contemporary literature has also explored Medusa under new lights, often questioning and reevaluating her role as a monster. Feminist writers, in particular, have seen in Medusa a symbol of how powerful women are often demonized or silenced. In some retellings, Medusa is portrayed as a figure of empowerment, a woman who, despite being punished and transformed, retains an unshakable power. These contemporary narratives highlight Medusa's ongoing relevance in discussions of gender, power, and justice in modern society. Moreover, Medusa has found her way into video games, where she often appears as a powerful antagonist, challenging players to confront her deadly gaze. Games like God of War and Assassin's Creed Odyssey have brought Medusa into the gaming world, offering players the chance to face the Gorgon in epic battles. These representations, while often focused on her monstrosity, also contribute to the perpetuation of her legend and introduce her story to a new audience. Finally, Medusa's presence in modern culture is a testament to how ancient myths continue to influence our narratives and collective imagination. She is not just a relic of the past, but a figure who continues to inspire and challenge contemporary perceptions of power and injustice. Her story is a reminder that, while times may change, certain fundamental issues, such as the struggle for power and the impact of injustice, remain as relevant today as they were in ancient times. Thus, Medusa, once a tragic figure, has become a multifaceted symbol whose impact resonates across various forms of art and culture. After delving into the fascinating story of Medusa, it's impossible not to reflect on the profound lessons her legend offers. Transformed from a beautiful young woman into a terrifying monster, Medusa teaches us about the extremes of power and vulnerability, about how society, and even the gods, can be unforgiving. But more than anything, Medusa forces us to ask, what truly defines a monster? Is it external appearance, or the circumstances that shape our perception? Over time, Medusa's narratives have been reinterpreted and retold, revealing new layers and meanings that continue to resonate today. Her story is a clear example of how mythological figures can be multifaceted, embodying both terror and compassion, strength and tragedy. What does this legend tell us about the treatment of those who are different? And how does this ancient story still echo in our modern discussions of justice, empathy, and power? Consider Medusa's enduring influence in art, literature, and popular culture. Why does she continue to fascinate and inspire so many? Perhaps it's because in Medusa, we see reflections of our own struggles, our own battles with fate, with power, and with how we are perceived by others. It's a legend that, despite its ancient roots, still speaks powerfully to the contemporary issues we face. So, as you absorb all that you've learned about Medusa, ask yourself, how can we apply the lessons of her story in our own lives? How can we challenge the injustices we encounter? And how can we look beyond appearances to understand the true nature of people and situations? Medusa reminds us that the truth is often more complex than it appears at first glance. If you found yourself intrigued and want to continue exploring these themes, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's so much more to discover about mythology, history, and how these ancient narratives continue to shape our world today. Let's uncover more secrets from the past and learn how they can guide us in the present.